Good morning and welcome to the ACEC Wisconsin Civil 3D Users Group. Today we will be discussing the WisDOT curb return modeling workflow. My name is Doug Benoit and I'm with Managed Design out of the Minneapolis area. My contact info is there, so if you have any questions later, please let me know. Today's agenda, we're going to quickly review the Wisconsin DOT project folder structure. We'll discuss the goals for creating curb ramps. We'll discuss an alternative to curb ramp design, and we will be going over the workflow for type 2 curb ramps. Briefly, this is the WisDOT project folder structure. You have the project ID, project number, you have a design folder and a corridors folder. That is what I will be using today. There's an example path for the project folder above. File naming, we'll be using something very similar to the corridor name and comments. It's been abbreviated as far as I can tell to CRDR for corridor. And for more details, you can go to the training manual and go to series 020.010. So the goals for creating curb ramps is to create curb ramp surface models. Okay, today we will be discussing curb ramps using a dynamic relationship, and this is vertically. If your roadway design changes horizontally, you'll have to go through this workflow again because this is a vertical dynamic relationship. This process allows for earlier design of curb ramps. So if changes are made again vertically, your curb ramps will adjust accordingly. And then again, this process that we're going to be looking at today or discussing today is applicable to dynamic roadway projects. An alternative to curb ramp design is to use non-dynamic models. A little bit tougher for an earlier design, which means if something changes, you're going to have to redo everything, both horizontally and vertically. But this alternative is applicable to rehab projects where the roadway is static or the roadway doesn't change. So the curb ramp workflow. Okay, the workflow that I'm following is, again, in the training manual. It's series 120.140. Okay, and again, this workflow generates a dynamic model, which may be a bit overkill for some projects. Those projects that don't warrant a dynamic model, it probably is a bit more efficient just to simply use break lines, feature lines, things like that. The steps involved in this workflow are first verifying the roadway design. Now note, some of the data has already been created, and this discussion is not about picks and clicks. If we spent the time picking and clicking and everything, we'd be here all day because it's very, I'm going to say, step intensive, not difficult, just a lot of data that has to be created, and it just everything has to work. So there may be some tweaking here and there. So again, this is just a discussion of the workflow from or just for the curb ramp itself. And today we're just going to be looking at the southeast quadrant of the intersection. You would repeat these steps for all the other quadrants. We're going to be looking at creating curb cuts. All right, from that we're going to create the curb ramp, set up corridors and surfaces, and then we'll link the curb ramp to the sidewalk design. Continuing, we'll create alignments and profiles representing the curb ramp brake lines, and then we'll create a curb ramp corridor and surface. We'll then create an object for daylighting, and then ultimately all of this data would be pasted into the refinement surface. Okay, now I'm just looking at the type 2 curb ramps. This workflow would be for the most part similar for the type 4B1 and 1A curb ramps. All right, so let's jump into Civil 3D to start our discussion on the curb ramps. Okay, now what I've done is I've got a number of files, as you can see across the top, where I've got some things created, and I'm doing this for speed or performance because the initial data that I had was very sluggish. There was a large corridor, lots of things going on, so I kind of thinned the herd a bit and made it a little bit faster, more faster for us. I'm also in Civil 3D 2016 versus the training manual indicates 2014. There's not a lot of difference. Steps are going to be the same, but again, I'm in 2016, so I think most of you guys may be there as well. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to verify the roadway design. Okay. Now, in this case, let me minimize this. We've got a number of alignments created. We've got our primary road, which in this case is called Main Street. We've got our secondary road, which is called First Street. We have alignments on the back of sidewalk in both, or for both the primary and secondary alignments. We have the inside of the sidewalk for, again, both of the main and or secondary and primary alignments. Now, one thing to note about these alignments, notice how it goes all the way through. If we look at the properties, you'll notice that we have some masking. Okay, so this masking is allowing us to hide parts of the alignment, so we can only display what we want to display. All right, we also have an alignment on our curb return and on the back of our curb return. At the curb ramps themselves, we actually have a small triangular alignment for the ramps themselves, or for the landings, I'm sorry, for the landing areas. Okay, if we go to the tool space and look at our alignments, okay, for our centerline alignments, we have our First Street and Main Street, so Main Street primary, First Street secondary. We have our southeast curb and gutter. Okay, and again, I've cleaned all these other ones up or removed them, so these are just polylines or blocks or whatever the heck I left them as. Again, just to keep the drawing a little thinner so it behaves a little bit better for me. All right. Those are our center line alignments. We also have offset alignments. Okay, so our First Street sidewalk in on the right, sidewalk out on the right. We have our Main Street sidewalk in and out on the right. And then here's the curb and gutter back. Okay. For miscellaneous alignments, we have our two landings, those triangular shaped alignments at the back of curb. All right. Okay, so those are our alignments. Now, at the landing, so the curb ramp alignments for or at the landings are not to exceed 1.5%. I'll let you know where this is indicated here in a little bit. Okay. And then for corridors, all we've got is the Main Street south. Okay, so let's take a look at, see if I can bring that up. I might have that frozen. Okay. All right, I'm just going to get rid of him, freeze him again. We're not using him at this point. Okay, so that's kind of the data that we have in here. All right, now design checks. All right, according to the FDM 11-46-10.1.1, side roads, or for side roads, the roadway longitudinal slope or cross slope is to be no more than 1.5%, and it needs to extend beyond the stop bar or yield bar, whichever is greater. For mainline roads, they may have a cross slope equal to the profile slope. Okay, so in terms of verifying our data, so here is, let me zoom out a little bit. So this is First Street. Okay, for Main Street, we have some flexibility, but for First Street, we need to make sure that we are no greater than 1.5% through the curb ramp area. So what you can do, and what I've done here, and also the training manual indicates this as well, is we've placed a point, just an AutoCAD point, at the crosswalk, and then we've projected that to our profile. So we know right through in here, okay, we need to be less than 1.5%. And in this case, we are. If we weren't, you would have to make some adjustments to your proposed profile. For the Main Street, whoops, sorry. I'll find it yet here. Oh, here we go, sorry. For the Main Street, if you look at the grades, they're all less than 1.5. So we're good. Okay. All right, the next thing we want to check, okay, is along our curb radius. Again, what I've done is I've placed just some AutoCAD points at the locations of our curb return and our crosswalks. I took those points and I projected those to the profile view. Okay, and then what I had to do here is I had to add some additional PVIs so that I could, in the curb ramp areas, okay, which is between these 2 points and these 2 points, I had to make sure that our grade was 1.5% or less. In this case, this is what we have. All right. Now, for the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to generate our curb cuts. Okay, so in our curb return, we're going to generate our curb cuts for our curb ramps. Okay, and we're going to use this assembly. Okay, this assembly is made up of a series of link width and slopes with super elevation enabled. Okay, for the gutter, we're going to assign the right inside lane. For the curb face, we're going to assign the right outside lane, and for the top of curb, we're going to assign the right inside shoulder. Now, when we get in there, I'll let you know kind of what everything is. The right inside lane or gutter is set to a -6.25. The right outside lane, which is the curb face, it has a width of 0.01 and a slope of 5,000%. That's going to give us, for the most part, a vertical face. Okay. And the subgrade, which extends 2 feet behind the back of curb, is actually, it's referencing the subgrade here so that it matches. Okay. Again, when we get into this super, I'll show you where all that's at. Now, for the assembly, let's take a quick look at the properties, construction tab. Here's our gutter. Okay, right inside lane, default slope of -6.25. Curb face, there's our width, there's our slope. Our curb top, again, our width and our slope. And then our subgrade is referencing the alignment, the curb and gutter alignment profile subgrade slope. Okay. And I believe this assembly is available on the WIS.tool palettes. All right, I'm going to hide this here a little bit. Okay. Okay. So with our profiles verified in terms of matching or meeting our requirements, our assembly ready to go, we're going to select our curb return alignment. Made escape here a couple times, and I'm going to go into the tabular editor. Oops, I'm sorry. In this drawing, I actually haven't calculated that. I have a note to change to a different drawing. So let me dismiss this for now. And I'll dismiss this. There we go. All right, I'm going to switch over to a different drawing. It'll be my O2 drawing here. Okay, so again, all the data is the same. Okay, let's take a look at this. And let's see if I can show all this at the same time. Okay, so here is our tabular editor for the Super E for the curb return alignment. Okay, and this is not the back. This is the, I'll say the lip of the curb. All right. Everything was, all these stations were added manually. Initially, we started with the start station and the end station. So we picked down here, picked up here. Okay. And then from there, we added the locations of the tapers. Okay. And the tapers can be anywhere from 1.5 to 2 feet in both directions from the curb ramp. In this example, I used 2 feet. Okay, this also matches the process that they did in the training manual as well. Okay, so manually we added the beginning of the taper, the end of the taper, again 2 feet from this point, 2 feet from this point, and added the begin and end tapers for this ramp. Okay, we then came back and added the ramp locations themselves. So this point, this point, this point, and this point. Okay, and at the beginning of the Super, we were at a right inside lane of minus 6.25, 5,000 for the outside lane, 0 for the top. Okay, that goes until the taper begins. Okay, and then it tapers down for the actual ramp, for the landing. All right, comes out of the landing, then back to our minus 6.25, 5,000 and 0 until it gets to the other curb ramp. All right. That is how the Super is set up for the curb cuts. All right. Now, one last word about the assembly and the sub-assemblies. In this case, you can't use standard curb sub-assemblies because they don't apply or allow you to enable super elevation. They're just curb, and we need a different behavior. Okay, so again, that's our Super. Okay. Okay, so now that we've got that, we can create our corridors. And so there's actually a couple corridors in here. There's a back of curb or a setup back of curb. Let me turn him on. All right, and quickly in the object viewer, and let's see if I can drive this. Looks like I'm having a tough time here. Let's see if I got a good view there. Okay, so here's our setup back of curb, and you can see the curb cuts in that curb return. Okay. Now let me turn off that corridor, and I'll open up the Main Street South. Okay, because we're using the same alignment. If we look at this corridor, again, I've greatly reduced the size of this corridor because if I had the whole First Street, Main Street, or secondary, primary, and all the other quads, this would be a very kind of somewhat bulky drawing and spinning around in the object viewer would be kind of tough. Again, you can see here from the setup back at curb, we can apply that to our Main Street, our part of it, corridor, and you can see our curb cuts in there. Okay. Now, from this corridor, we're going to create the the corridor surface, and we're going to add that to the ultimate surface. Again, my ultimate surface is somewhat tiny, so let me just select that. Now there's our curb return surface. Again, if I select this and again quickly in the object viewer, see if I can spin this, and we'll go to a shades of gray. Okay, again, you can see now it's the back of curb we're looking at, so kind of looks like I might have a little issue there, but again, we're getting to our oh, it looks okay. We're getting our curb cuts defined. All right, I'm going to freeze that. All right, now the ultimate surface, again, I have a very small part of it. This is the top of the finished ground of the entire corridor. Okay, the top surface does not extend, but the ultimate, let me say this, the ultimate surface extends all the way to the slope intercepts where the top surface doesn't. And again, ignore this and that I've only got a part, but if I had this turned on, it would be extending out to here. The only place that we would have a void is in our curb return areas. Okay, and that's the whole purpose of this workflow, is to generate those curb returns. Okay. All right. So real quickly before I get a little bit farther ahead of, let's just real quickly take a look at our corridor properties. So parameters, here's the alignment that we're using, which has got the super elevation assigned to it. Here's the profile, the proposed, and then that curb fillets assembly that I showed you earlier. Okay, and then your start and end station. So a typical corridor. Okay. And then for the offset, for the width, the elevation, again, we are targeting, in this case, the southeast quadrant curb and gutter, and its proposed profile. And in here, we are targeting First Street and Main Street, right lane. There's a couple alignments in there. And then for the elevation as well. Okay, so let me cancel here, cancel it. So again, that's why we're getting this part of the corridor, First Street and alignments and stuff like that. All right, and I did turn the frequency up to make it a little bit better. To fill in this gap, if I was going to just leave the model this way, I would add a manual station here. Okay, but what we're after is right in here. Okay. Next, because our road is not 90 degrees, we need to create a couple of auxiliary alignments so that we can actually generate or create the, I'll say the setup curb ramps. Okay, so within this area here for both the primary and secondary alignments. All right, now the auxiliary alignments, they will be, we'll start them at 0, but we'll make sure that they extend beyond our crosswalk geometry. All right, now again, I've already done this, so I'm going to display those. There's our 2 auxiliary alignments, starting at centerline, one perpendicular to our crosswalks in both directions, and then just grip editing them using extension, extended those beyond our crosswalks. All right, once the alignments are have been created, we just simply create a couple of existing or surface profiles using the existing surface. And we don't have to display all this information. So if I go into my alignments, okay, there's my first auxiliary and my Main Street auxiliary. And if you look at those, we have a profile for both. And again, this is a surface profile, okay? And they are not graphically in the drawing. We don't need them to be graphically in the drawing. Okay. From our auxiliary alignments and profiles, we are going to use for this southeast quadrant, we're going to use this setup landing right assembly. Okay, the baseline is the auxiliary, and then we will set our targets so that it ends up out here. Okay. All right, so for that, I'm going to jump into a different drawing. Sorry about the drawings back and forth. I'm just trying to keep it so it behaves a bit better for me during this presentation. Okay, so again, our auxiliary alignments, we have profiles for them. Again, here's our setup landing assemblies. Again, very simple. Again, I believe all of these assemblies are available on the WIS.dot tool palettes. Okay. All right, now these are the 2 resulting surfaces that that were created, and they came from these 2 corridors here. And I'll just look at the Main Street. Okay, so again, our auxiliary alignment profile and the setup landing right, starting and ending stations. Okay, and those are, you can kind of see where the curb ramps are at. Excuse me. And then for the targets, we're going to target, you can see curb and gutter back, our landing Main Street, so that little triangular one, and then our sidewalk in and sidewalk out on the south. And you can see for the extension and currently no elevation targets. Okay, so we cancel there. And again, you'd repeat that for the secondary, or in this case, First Street. And then we created surfaces for those, or set up Okay, so again, we've got setup corridors and then set up surfaces for those curb ramps. All right, so let me freeze those guys. There we go. All right, now we want our curb ramps to tie into our sidewalk profiles. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the intersection tool to accomplish that. So I've placed two intersections here, and we'll look at the First Street right sidewalk in, and here's our intersecting alignments. See if I can move this out of the way a bit. So we've got our Main Street right sidewalk out south. That would be this one. And we have our First Street right sidewalk in, which is this one. Okay, so this, and then you would repeat that for Main Street or the primary. Okay, so you've got this alignment, and then you want to assign the appropriate profiles. Okay, now when you create this, you're not creating any secondary alignments or profiles, so I'll show you real quick. I'm going to go intersections, create intersection. We'll pick this, and I'll just pick this one here. It doesn't matter because I'm gonna cancel out. All right, name, style, label, all that. We can leave that as default for what we're going to do at this point. I'm going to go next. But this is where we want to make sure we have our priority 1 and 2 correct in their profiles. And then this is important. You do not want to add any offset, create any additional offset alignments in profiles. Okay. And throughout all of the use of the intersection tool in this workflow, you will never check this box, or you will always uncheck this box. All right, so I'm just going to cancel. All right, and what that does, let's see if I can find it in here. Whoops, sorry, wrong profile. Is the intersection tool locks that profile to that location. So I can lengthen, shorten this one, but because this is locked, because it's tied to, and I'll see if I can find it over here. Okay, because we're tying these together, the software automatically locks the profile at that intersecting point. Okay, and that is how we can tie dynamically our curb ramp design to our sidewalk. Okay. Now, once we've got all this, all of our alignments, our corridors, our setup corridors, our setup surfaces, we've got those created. We save the file. We create data references for that information. So if I come down into my data shortcuts, you can see I've got our curb ramps. We've got our ultimate surface in there. Okay, we go down into our alignments. We've got our intersection Main Street, northeast, southeast. Again, some of these I've removed. Some of them I haven't. Okay, offsets. We've got our sidewalk in, out. We've got our landings. For our miscellaneous, we've got our ramps. Okay, so again, we've got all this data created. We're going to go into a new drawing. Let me synchronize here. And what we're going to do is we're going to data shortcut. We'll give it a second here. But we're going to data shortcut the curb ramps, the surfaces for the curb ramps, those little areas that we just looked at. We're going to create a data shortcut to the ultimate surface, again, which is the ultimate top surface that goes all the way to the daylighting. Okay, let's, I'm going to dock this guy down at the bottom and auto hide him for now. Okay, so again, if we go to our surfaces, all right, here's the 4 data shortcutted, the ultimate, the ramps, and the existing ground. Okay, if we go to our alignments, all right, we're not really doing anything with the center line, so we don't need center line alignments. But for our offsets, we've got our sidewalk, Main Street in and out, and our curb and gutter back. And then for our miscellaneous, we have our landings, our ramps, and our tapers. Okay, but again, notice out of here only the 2 landings are data shortcutted. So we're going to create many of the other ones. Okay. All right. So we have a new drawing. We've data shortcutted all this information in. All right. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create all of our curb ramp alignments. Okay. So we've got 1 curb ramp alignment there for the secondary or first street, and 1 for Main Street. Okay. Then we have our tapers, 1 for Main Street or the primary, and 1 for First Street, the secondary. Okay, so we've got our tapers, and then the last alignment is our back of curb. Okay, and if you look at, see if I can select all these. Whoops. Let me turn my selection cycling off for now. There we go. Okay, so if you look at these 2 points here, they correspond to this endpoint here. Same thing here. These 2 endpoints here correspond to, I'm sorry, this one corresponds to here. Okay, I'm sorry. The taper endpoint here corresponds to the end of the curb return here. Same thing for this. Let me unselect this. Okay, the 2 back of curb, I might have to double check this. Corresponds to, let's see if I can turn this on right. I'm looking for my main corridor. Maybe I have it on high. Oh, it's the existing surface. It ties into the existing surface. Okay, let me show you the existing surface quick. Oh, I'm sorry, the ultimate surface. I'll just turn on some triangles quick. Oh, I might have that frozen too. Oh, I'll have to go find that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let me freeze that one. Oh, okay, I see it happens. So again, I'm tied into the existing surface at that point. Okay, so let me freeze that again. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Once we have our once we have our alignments all set up, we're going to create profiles on all of these alignments. So our curb ramp profiles so that our corridor, because we're going to create a corridor for our curb ramps. Now, initially we're going to create just an arbitrary proposed profile. Can be at 0, 0. It really doesn't matter because we're going to then use the intersection to again establish a dynamic tie to all the different parts, to the different alignments and their profile. So again, if something changes, the change will be applied to our curb ramp. Okay, so we have all these alignments, and then what we're going to do is we're going to, and these have been modified. I had a little oops in here someplace. I haven't been able to figure it out quite yet. I have some weird slopes in here, but it still will give you an idea how this works. Okay. All right. Now that we have our curb return alignments and again preliminary or arbitrary profiles created, we're going to use the intersection tool just like we did before. And in fact, there's going to be an intersection on top of an intersection, okay, which is okay because it's dealing with two different alignments and two different profiles. So we're going to create intersections at all the following locations. Okay, so let me thaw these guys. Okay, whoops, I missed one. I think I missed two. There we go. All right, these don't need them because if you remember, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, the alignment, the main street or primary in this case is controlling because of the two curb ramps. When we created those curb ramps, the primary was lower. Okay, so for the primary, we can actually use the surface profile. Okay, so if I select that and I go to properties, okay, we're using the setup curb ramps for Main Street. All right. All right, and again, what we've got here are our intersections. Again, I'll just jump in real quick, and you can ignore the number 3 and 4. I just want to make sure that your first two are correct and the profiles are correct. And again, you're not creating any auxiliary profiles or alignments from that. All right, then we can create a corridor. So once we have all of our alignments, our intersections, our profiles, we can create our corridor, and the assembly that we're using is this. Okay, again, this is from the WIS.dot tool palettes, and this again is a very simple assembly. It's made up of two parts, two sub-assemblies, a mark point and a link width and slope. The mark point is actually doing the bulk of the work. Okay, it's got a point name and point code name of ramp. The link width and slope is only there because it has to be, because Civil 3D will not let you create a corridor just from a mark point. There has to be something with a link. Okay, so you can notice this link is very short. zero slope, so it's going to be very tiny. So we have to have that in there. Okay. And then we create a corridor. And again, I've already created the corridor. All right. And let's jump into the corridor properties. And here is our corridor. All right. So all of those back at curbs, the landings, the ramps, the tapers, we're using all the same assembly. Okay. The alignments, the profiles. Okay. Starting, ending station. Okay. All right. We're not targeting anything because we're not really using that link width and slope. Okay. So we end up with that corridor. Right. Using that corridor, we build a surface. Okay, and we're going to use feature lines and that ramp code. All right. And to that surface, we're going to add a boundary. We need to make sure it's a hide boundary, and we're going to use the add interactively to make the boundary. Now, I did not create a feature line until after the fact. You could do it now or later. If I select the corridor, I can create a feature line from corridor. All right, and when I get into, let me jump back in my corridor since I jumped out. When I came over here and said add interactively, I could pick that feature line. Or I could, in what I did in my case, I went from point to point to point at the back of the sidewalk because we need a boundary here. Okay, the rest of the corridor is fine. Okay, only in here do we need to hide the corridor and surface. Okay, now the key to this is, for one, it has to be a hide boundary. Okay, after you add that in the first time, you're going to go to definition and you're going to add it in again. So you're going to come over here and pick add, and you're going to add, or I'm sorry, you're going to change the endpoint from 1110 or whatever it may be to 0. So the second time you add it, you want your start and end to be 0, and then your boundary will validate. Okay, that is key to getting this boundary to work that doesn't really close. All right, so cancel there, cancel there. Let me turn on my okay. They're on the same one, and that's okay. And you know what? Let me go back in there and turn some of that off real quick, because you turn this one on and this one on. Whoops, I think I turned the wrong one off. There we go. Okay. All right. So now this one has the feature line that I added. Okay. And I'll go back to the surfaces in a moment here. But what we ended up with is we had a hide boundary here, so the corridor was hidden. And then what we need to do to fill this in, or actually grade this, is using a feature line. Now the feature line is dynamically linked. So when I come up to my feature lines from corridor, I'll grab ramp. All right, we put it in the correct site. We can give it a name. Style is optional. Layer's fine. We don't need smoothing, but this is key here. create dynamic link to corridor. We pick OK. So now this feature line is dynamically linked to the corridor. So again, as it goes up or down, this will go with it. Okay. And then using the grading tools, okay, we selected our site. We created a group name, in this case, grading curb ramps daylight. We chose the existing grading target surface. Now this surface was created so that was kind of a standalone existing ground. Nothing is grading to it, so we can hopefully eliminate any kind of circular referencing or any issues with parts of our corridor or surface disappearing when we close and open a file. So that was our target service, and then I went and using just a simple grading, I changed it to surface. I left the slope 2:1 even though I put in 6:1, and I just entered that later. So when I came over here and I hit create grading, it prompted me for my slope values, and I just put 6:1 in there. Okay, and it looks like this. Okay, 6:1, 6:1. Okay, so now what we've got, I'm going to dismiss this. We've got surfaces that we can now add to our refinement surface. So at this point, what you would do is save this file and then create data shortcuts of our surfaces. You would then go into your refinement surface and paste the surfaces together, and you would end up with a final refinement surface. All right. That takes us to the end of that workflow. You can kind of see why I didn't do picks and clicks. Again, more of a discussion. There's a lot involved there, but again, not very difficult, but just, a lot of data has to be created. You just got to keep track of all that. So with that, I'm done. And don't forget to fill out your evaluations. And with that, thanks and enjoy.